Hey folks, Alan Saunders joined by Mike Vukovcan once again for the Friday football show on Pittsburgh Sports Live. Thanks for joining us. Once again, it's week 2 here in the Western Pennsylvania 2020 football season, and we'll have a full slate of coverage at Pittsburgh Sports Now. I'll be covering 3 games this weekend. Once again, I'll have Penn Hills and Woodland Hills tonight, Friday night at the Wolverina. I'll have Pitt Syracuse at Heinz Field Saturday at noon, and then the Steelers and the Denver Broncos on Sunday. But really, I think the big story in local football happened off the field on Thursday night as Baldwin defensive tackle Dorien Ford, a 3-star member of the class of 2021, committed to Pitt over fellow finalists West Virginia, Penn State, and Michigan. Mike, you talked to Dorien yesterday about his decision, and what is the reason the big, talented defensive tackle decided to stay at home and play at Pitt?
He was an elusive guy to try to get a hold of. Once I finally did talk with him, very enlightening kid, very had a lot to say, very well spoken. And I think it came down to 2 things, Pitt being home and being the hometown team, I should say, and just the amount of interest they showed in him for 2 years. This wasn't a recruitment where a program offers a kid a scholarship and then checks in every once in a while and hey, we're interested in you. They Pitt, meaning Pitt, they showed him what they like to say, love. It was a tag team of Narduzzi, Corey Sanders, and Charlie Partridge. They, according to Dorien, there wasn't very many days that went by that in some fashion he didn't hear from them via text, phone call, email, whatever. And they showed him how much they wanted him. And another thing that stood out to him compared to other programs, he visited Penn State actually quite a few times, 7 times to be exact. When he went to Pitt, he just had a feeling there that he was already part of the team. The way he was known by the players on the team, the coaches, the staff, just everything. He felt as though he was a member of the Pitt team, and he just felt that familiarity like no other program. And, the last thing is, his buddies on that defensive line. That's going to be a story that we're going to be covering the next 3 to 4 years. He's very interested and very excited with playing with Johnson, Donald, Hayes, and who else am I missing there? I'm missing another one.
That's the
4th. He's the 4th one. That was big for him. He thinks they could be special, and he thinks they're going to continue to do what Pitt's doing right now, and that's dominate on defense with that defensive line.
And I think that's that's the whole story, is talking about that defensive line. I mean, they were the strength of Pitt's team last year. You lose Jalen Twyman, who opts out of this season, and it still looks like the strength of the team this year, right? With Rashad Weaver and Keyshawn Camp coming back, and we'll see whether or not those guys get to play this Saturday against Syracuse, but they're coming back eventually, and they're really, really good football players. And then, guys like Devin Danielson, Hama Baldonado, John Morgan, Deslin Alexander, Kalijah Cansey, Tyler Bentley, David Green. They have so many good players. And then you see what Dayon Hayes does as a true freshman. His first game, Pat Narduzzi says he didn't even play he was on the scout team in practice before that game against Austin Peay. Gets out there in the 4th quarter and has 2 sacks and forces a fumble. And then you had these 3 players. To me, I think this has the potential to be the calling card of Pitt under Pat Narduzzi, is just this absolutely dominant defensive line that they built it once, and now they're just reloading it. And it's really an embarrassment of riches at the position with the guys they have and the guys they have coming. And to me, I think, obviously, Pat Narduzzi deserves a lot of credit. He recruited Dayon Hayes almost all by himself, if you remember, last season. But the 2 other guys that I think are a huge part of this is Corey Sanders. Corey Sanders has was not always, a part of this staff. They brought him in when they got the 10th assistant a couple of years ago. They put him in Western Pennsylvania. In addition to a couple other areas, it's not like that's only his only focus, but he has made a huge difference in local recruiting for Pitt. And I think Charlie Partridge has to get all the credit in the world for this defensive line. Yes, he's helping to get really talented players, both in Pittsburgh and from Florida, where he has long recruiting connections. But not every guy that I just mentioned in that list were these highly touted recruits. Rashad Weaver was a 2-star kid. Haba Baldonado didn't have any offers until January. John Morgan was looked at as many as being undersized to play defensive end. People wanted to play him at linebacker. Charlie Partridge just turned these guys into a stellar unit. And man, if this is going to be Pitt's calling card, they've got to find a way to keep him around. And that's not going to be easy, because this is going to be a group that's going to get some attention, not just this year, but for the foreseeable future as well.
Yeah. And, we focus on those guys, and you mentioned those guys, but I think just all around, it took Narduzzi maybe a couple tries, but any good program, it's all about recruiting and your assistants. And he's, you got to give him credit for assembling a staff around him that is top notch. They are good. And I think we started to see some examples last week. And I think that's going to be a huge benefit for Pitt this year as far as the free year for these players. They got a lot of kids on the field last Saturday. It's not going to be that way every week when the competition goes up. But I think these assistants, the ones you mentioned, and the entire staff, they've pulled in some real talent here the last couple of years. And, it's early, so it's not, who knows what's going to happen. But I think Pitt's recruiting, I don't care what their number is nationally and whether these guys have 2 or 3 stars. I see players, especially on that defensive side, and they look really good. One thing I want to bring up, though, one quick thing about Dorien Ford. We're talking about the defensive line. I think the plan is for him to be – I haven't heard anything other than he's going to be a defensive lineman. However, I was told by a guy that knows Dorien Ford very well and is a very good evaluator of talent that it wouldn't surprise me, it wouldn't surprise him if down the line that he eventually possibly could turn into a interior lineman on the Pitt's offensive line. He believes that he actually might be more suited to play a guard, and he believes he has NFL skills. This guy's worked with NFL players before, and he believes that Dorien Ford would actually be a better offensive guard than he would as a defensive tackle. So I think that might be something to keep an eye on. That kind of goes along with Trey Anderson, the tight end they got. Right now, he's slated to play tight end for Pitt as far as what he's doing now. But there's a chance he could also, depending on what they bring in this class and depending on how big he gets, he could also slide over to offensive tackle. And remember, that's a position his dad played in the NFL, John Anderson, and he also coached it in college. So I think those are a couple things to keep an eye on as far as future positions. That's where those guys are slated to play right now. Year or two from now, if Pitt still has all this talent on the defensive line, it wouldn't shock me. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it wouldn't shock me if down the line Dorien Ford moves to the offensive side of the ball.
Let's move on to talk about Pitt and Syracuse this weekend, Saturday, Heinz Field, noon kick, ACC Network. I'll be there for that one. And a big line. That's, I think, the thing that jumps out to me is Pitt is favored by almost 3 touchdowns, 20.5 points against a conference opponent. I don't have it in front of me, but I have to figure that's the first time that's happened in a very long time. The last time Pitt had a line like that against a conference team. Syracuse was easily manhandled by North Carolina on the road last week. Comes in with some big question marks, especially at offensive line. Mike, what's your take on this game, and what are you looking for on Saturday?
Sort of like what I thought last week against Austin Peay, and Pitt was a better team. And I like the fact that they just beat them and beat them bad, 55-0. I think that's what has to happen this week. I think if Pitt and their program believes they're a top 25 program and they're making these steps up, when you play an opponent that they're clearly better than, and Pitt is clearly better than Syracuse, this line should reflect, or the final score should reflect what the line is. That's 20.5. And if it's a close game, then Pitt didn't play well, and that's disappointing. Even if they win, and they win by, a touchdown, something close. If this game is close at the end, I think that's a disappointment, even though they win. Pitt's a better team than them. They've won 15 of the last 18 games against them. Syracuse struggles on offense. Their last couple years, they've struggled to protect their quarterback, Tommy DeVito, excuse me. Pitt had 9 sacks against them last year. 7 sacks they allowed last week against North Carolina. That's Pitt's strength. And they have trouble moving the ball. I just think this sets up, regardless of who plays for Pitt. I would be surprised if this is a close game tomorrow. I don't know, 40-42-7, 42-10, something like that. I just think Pitt should easily beat Syracuse tomorrow.
I'm not sure. I think it's going to be that easy. I think one of the things you have to look for is the turnovers. Syracuse had a pair of interceptions last week. They have an all-American safety and Cisco back there who can make an interception on just about any play. I think Pitt's going to have to hold on to the football. And I think, what we've seen from the Pitt defense against the Syracuse offense over the years is that Syracuse is probably going to have trouble sustaining drives. They're probably going to have trouble moving the ball, but they can also hit some big plays. The Pitt defense is going to man up on those 4 and 5 wide receiver sets. They're going to need that front 4 to get home. If Syracuse is able to give DeVito even a little bit of time, they can hit a couple big plays. I'm not saying I think it's going to be a close game, but I think Syracuse will be able to score a little bit. And I'm not sure if how good the Pitt offense is. I think 55-0 was an impressive performance, but it is Austin Peay. I think we'll see really how good they can be this week against an ACC defense. I still like Pitt to win. I'm not sure it'll be by the 3 touchdown margin, but I think it should be a pretty handy win for the Panthers. And I'm also very unsure about who's going to play on this defensive line. Rashad Weaver, from everything I'm reading with the ACC rules, basically can't play if what he's saying is correct about when he tested positive for COVID-19. And, the other players that were held out, notably Keyshawn Camp, we don't know if he'll be able to play, but it looks like even if he will be able to play, he won't have practiced all week. So will you want him to play? I don't know. And Haba Baldonado also injured in that Austin Peay game. So it could be down 3 defensive linemen. That's an important position for them. But I don't see anything that's scary about Syracuse as a whole. They have a nice scheme on offense. DeVito still made a lot of mistakes as a young quarterback a year ago. And outside of Cisco, really not anybody on that defense that's real.
Question for you, Alan. You saw it in person, unlike most people. You were at the game last week. As far as the young talent that you saw, Jordan Addison, obviously he's a guy that everyone's going to point out to. Did anything else stand out to you as far as the young, aside from the touchdown by Bard? Anything like is there any player that maybe caught your eye last week? Young player.
I was really impressed by Brandon George playing 3 phases as a redshirt freshman, young guy who hasn't seen a lot of playing time. Worked in at fullback a little bit, worked in at outside linebacker a little bit. He's been playing middle linebacker, played special teams. I thought that was interesting to me. I thought the second team offensive line had some guys that played really well. You look at that interior, that Owen Drexel and Blake Zabovic. I think those guys could start for a lot of ACC teams, and you really wouldn't miss that much of a. You really wouldn't have that huge of a drop off, and that's even with a couple of multi-year starters in Hargrove and Morrissey in front of them. I think those guys are that good. I really think they have a ton of depth at safety. Eric Hallett and Brandon Hill are going to be really good players for this team going forward. They're going to start next year, and they could be all ACC players next year. I think they're that good, especially Hill. I thought he was outstanding. and just the Israel Abanikanda at running back. He has breakaway speed, but I liked his vision on the draw. They called it there in the red zone on a 10-yard play, and he made a really nice move to set up a block. I think that shows what you need to see from a freshman running back. Sure, he's fast, but you have to be able to set up blocks and things like that. And to do it on a draw, I think that shows a little bit. So how much can you take away from Austin P? I don't know, but I thought I saw a lot of nice things from some young guys and some not so young guys. I mean, some of those guys, Drexel's this fourth-year guy. He hasn't been able to play because he's been behind Morrissey, but they have a lot of depth. Somebody asked me, is this Pat Narduzzi's best team? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But this is his deepest team. Yeah. I mean, they could have injuries at any number of positions, and there isn't more than one or two on the whole team where I feel like an injury would be a big bad situation for them, where there isn't a guy coming that could take over in the future. I really think that, and I think that's a testament to, like you said, this coaching staff getting better over the years and bringing in better talent and more talent to this team. I really do think they're as deep as they've been.
Were you surprised Vincent Davis is getting a start last week? AJ Davis did. Is that a big deal? Is that just, does that really mean anything because of the number of backs they use throughout the game? Or do you read anything at that he moved him up and publicly said it? A lot of times he'll put the or in the depth chart and you don't know until game time. He just came out on Thursday and said Vincent Davis is our starter. He earned it. Does that what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Vincent Davis and AJ Davis are probably going to go back and forth about this starting running back thing for most of the year, unless one of them really takes off ahead of the other. I think they're both very capable. They bring a little bit different skill set. Davis is bigger, stronger. AJ Davis, I should say, is bigger, stronger. Vincent Davis is a lot more elusive, has a little more speed in open field. Needs to work on his pass protection a little bit. I think that was an issue with him a year ago. That's tough as a freshman. They usually all struggle with that. So I think the other three guys you're going to see working more into bit parts. I think we saw Daniel Carter as a potential goal line option. Came in at the end of the first drive there, pounded it in from 4 yards. He was already a big running back. He looks even bigger to me this year. I think he really could be an option at that position. I think you saw Abanikanda be a potential change of pace guy who can bring a little bit of speed at any time you think you need it. Todd Sibley, to me, is still a really talented player. He's a great pass blocker, their best pass blocker. So if you get into a situation where it's a 2-minute drill, you want to leave one back on the field, you don't want to deal with changing him, you're going to be throwing the ball, why not have him out there, right? And so I think that's how it's going to work for those three guys. And I think the two Davises will kind of go back and forth until somebody really grabs hold of it. I don't really consider what Vincent Davis did against Austin P to be grabbing hold of it. Maybe he was the better back of the two that game, but in the long haul, one game against an FCS team is pretty meaningless. We'll see how things go throughout the rest of the season. Where you want to go next? You want to go Whippeal or the Steelers?
Steelers. I think that was an impressive, after all things considered, after the first drive or first half, starting with that 2-minute drive, they were good, and Ben played well, and you were there, you were in person. That defense looked really. We talk about Pitt's defense. Steelers defense looked really, really good and really, really fast.
Yeah, I mean I was so impressed by their game plan. They went in, they were like, Saquon Barkley is not going to do anything. He's the best running back in the league, and we're going to completely take him away. And we don't think Daniel Jones can beat us. And he couldn't. And, of course, missing Golden Tate, one of his big playmakers. So you got to give that caveat. But if you can take away the best running back in the league, or one of the top three anyway, you can take away any team's running game, right? I mean, if you can do that to Saquon Barkley, the Steelers have proven that just whenever they want to, they can be like, nope, you can't run the ball. Maybe you can do some other stuff. And look, there are teams out there that can beat the Steelers without running the ball that probably don't care if they run the ball. But the New York Giants aren't one of them. And I don't think the Denver Broncos are either. I think this is a pretty consistent game. Like you look at the schedule coming up ahead. I don't think the Houston Texans are that team. I don't think the Tennessee Titans are that team. I don't think the Philadelphia. You can beat a lot of football teams if you just say, nope, sorry, you cannot run the football against us. We'll deal with whatever your quarterback can throw at us. And there just aren't. I think the way the schedule sets up, I think that's a really good game plan. Now, is that a Super Bowl winning game plan? I don't know. I think you're going to have to stop some players like Lamar Jackson, like Patrick Mahomes, who have a very diverse skill set and have weapons around them that can make you pay for that game plan. But we'll see what else they have up their sleeve. That was week one and just an incredibly impressive game plan. Bud Dupree, woo, is Bud going to get paid after this season? Man, he gets props as a pass rusher, which he deserves. He had an outstanding season in 2019 as a pass rusher after admittedly being kind of so-so before that, but he has always been dangerous against the run. He showed that again. He runs down screens on the backside like a monster. He is just an impressive player. Put him with TJ Watt, two ridiculous guys inside, and Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. And I don't know how you plan to block that four-man rush. I just don't. It seems impossible to me.
Yeah, and both teams are going to be dealing with injuries this week. The Steelers with their offensive line. It looks as though, as of right now, Wisniewski and DeCastro are going to be out. But Denver appears as though, actually should not appears, Denver have more serious injuries than the Steelers with Phillip Lindsay, Bradley Chubb, Von Miller. They're missing their starting cornerback. They got more problems as far as trying to replace those guys, and I think that's advantage Steelers, especially if the Steelers' offensive line is in question. When you don't have to go against Von Miller and Bradley Chubb, that's going to help things out a little bit, and I think that sets up for the Steelers. And the other factor is, let's remember, Drew Lock is still a young player, as was Daniel Jones. And going up against the Steelers defense, especially this defense, you can do. We're going to find out about Drew Lock. He was a first-round pick a couple years ago. He has a lot of weapons around him, but it takes time. And learning on the job isn't easy. It really isn't easy when you go against the Steelers defense. But he does have some weapons, maybe more so than the New York Giants, as far as an all-around package with a really good tight ends that can catch, a couple different receivers. They have speed with KJ Hamler from Penn State. He didn't play last week. And although they're not going to have Lindsey, they have a pretty good backup in Melvin Gordon. So it'll be a challenge. I think it'll be more of a challenge for the Steelers defense, but I still like them to come out ahead on this one.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, the Steelers lose two guys at guard, but I really like Kevin Dotson. I think he's going to be a starter for this team in the very near future. I'm not sure how much of the offense he knows. He was hurt during training camp when they were installing things, and so that probably set him back from his development as a rookie. But I don't think it's crazy to think that he could start next year. And so maybe he won't be perfect, but I think that's a pretty good situation for him being the third guard. You can do way worse than that. And as far, I think the Broncos are probably a little tougher test for the Steelers defense, just because, if Cortland Sutton plays, he's a weapon. KJ Hamler, like you talked about, their tight ends. But Melvin Gordon is not as good as Saquon Barkley, and I'm not sure Locke is any better than Daniel Jones. To me, this is only a marginally more difficult task for the Steelers defense, and I think the Steelers offense showed they can be a lot better than it was in week one. You saw what they did in the second, really from the 2-minute warning of the first half on in that game. After they really got things going, they were a completely different offense, and I think you're going to see a lot more of that going forward than what you saw in maybe the first 3 or 4 drives of the game. That offense is going to score more than 26 points. And so 26-16 winners a week ago, on Monday, I guess, against the Giants. I think this Denver defense doesn't scare me. I think they can go way over 30. And so I like the Steelers pretty comfortably here. And honestly, the way the schedule's falling, they should be big favorites for a few weeks in a row. There isn't really a team that's coming up anytime soon that seems like they should be a big challenge if the Steelers can stay relatively healthy.
One other thing, Alan, is the big topic, I guess, as far as on the field topic that's going to be talked about up until game time, is the running back situation. Once again, unfortunately for James Conner, he got banged up again. This time it was an ankle. Benny Snell went in there, had his first 100-yard game. There's two different trains of thought. Most of the thought coming out of the South Side, as far as reporters like you, are that if healthy, Mike Tomlin will go back with James Conner as the starter and not start Benny Snell, despite what he saw. I guess two-part. Do you agree with that? And right there, do you agree with that decision? And do you think he'll do that, I guess?
Yeah, I would expect James Conner to start if he's healthy. I don't think he's done anything that would make him lose that job. I mean, we talked with Mike Tomlin about this first couple drives. The Steelers had no tape on the Giants defense. They had no idea what even formation they were going to come out in. And Tomlin said, look, we guessed one way and they came out a completely different way. So yeah, those first 3 or 4 drives, we had the wrong game plan in. And so I don't think you can put that on Conner. I thought he looked okay physically out there. I think there was anything wrong with the way he was running. They just weren't blocking the Giants. They weren't fooling them with their scheme at all either. But I really do think that James Conner he's a better receiver than Benny Snell. I think he's a better pass blocker, although I thought Snell did okay in that role. You still saw a lot of Jalen Samuels in the second half of that game because he is a better pass blocker than Benny Snell is. And so, listen, I think Benny Snell has showed some things that he needs a bigger role, but I don't think James Conner should lose a starting job. I think, Mike Tomlin likes to talk about his bell cow, his 30-play game guy. Listen, I think those days are over in the NFL. There aren't very many teams that do that. And right now, I think Snell is showing the Steelers that they have 2 guys that can play. And so why not play them both? Why not split up the carries a little bit and get Snell some reps? He looks like he can do some things running the ball, even if Conner might have the better overall skill set. And let's be honest, maybe 10 fewer snaps a game will help James Conner stay on the field. Listen, that's not something that any player wants to hear, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think that at this point either. So I would be playing Snell more than maybe he played last year, but I don't think Conner's done anything to lose his starting job at this point.
And one other thing on offense, something I'm looking forward to watching not only Sunday, but going into the future, is the relationship that Roethlisberger continues to build with his weapons on offense. I think this is as talented and diverse amount of weapons he's had in a long time. He has 2 tight ends. I think he can catch the ball. I think Ebron is obviously going to be really good. Johnson, I think he can go throw to him every time and be comfortable with that. The catch from Claypool was ridiculous. James Washington's I think he's going to be a good receiver with Ben Roethlisberger. Ben's not afraid to throw it up there and allow his receiver to go get the ball, and that's Washington's specialty. And then Juju, as I said last week, I think Juju's going to come back to form now that he has Roethlisberger there. I think Ben has to love what he sees in front of him. There's not a lot of veteran guys that maybe he's comfortable with, but that's what the regular season is going to be about, developing that relationship. And I think Steelers have a chance to be good on offense, maybe not right away, but as the season goes on, I think this offense has a chance to be very potent.
Yeah, I love the playmakers that put around Ben Roethlisberger. Got Deontay Johnson last year, at Eric Ebron, Chase Claypool this year. I think it's a really diverse offense. I think you're going to see a lot more Claypool as the season goes on. I think he's a dangerous player, extremely fast for his size. You don't think of a receiver that size running a jet sweep. That'd be kind of crazy. He picks up the huge first down at the end of the game on it. Looked like he could have gone for 5 more yards if he hadn't. And also makes a heady play for a rookie to slide down and keep the clock running, right? I really like everything about that pick and him as a player. I think he's going to be a huge part of this offense going forward. It will not be a big jump, but as he goes into his rookie year and builds confidence and builds comfort with Ben Roethlisberger, I think he's going to continue to be a bigger part of it. And how about James Washington, man? He's the shortest guy of those 4, catches the ball over the middle with 7 seconds on the clock and trucks 2 guys at the goal line. Juju and him down at the bottom of the pile after a fumble. You just love everything about that receiving core right now. And I think, yeah, I really think the sky's the limit for this offense. I really don't see anything that's going to slow them down if they stay healthy. Even I didn't think the offensive line played all that well. It didn't really seem to hurt them in the passing game. It hurt them in the running game, but didn't really seem to hurt them in the passing game once they got things going. I'm very bullish on the Steelers right now. I think they're in a very good place, and the schedule lines up really well for them, at least for the first half.
Yep. And last thing we want to talk about here is Friday Night Football. I'll be manning the Friday night score updates throughout the night. And as you mentioned, you're heading out to Woodland Hills. Should be a good one.
Yeah, I'm excited. There's a lot of good players between those two teams. Penn Hills has been the better team over the last couple seasons, but I feel like Woody's been close. They lost 3 games to playoff teams last year by 4 points or less. I feel like they've been coming on for a couple of years now. They have a lot of talent. I see 3 or 4 Division I guys on that team. And so maybe the toughest test that they'll have presented for a team like Penn Hills in a little while. Penn Hills obviously has had a ton of success. Won a WPIAL championship a couple of years ago, and one of the better teams in that classification. One of our top prospects, Noah Roach, who's a defensive back going to Akron there as well. So yeah, and always weird with no fans, but not going to turn down a trip to the Wolverine, one of the legendary WPIAL football venues that feels like it hasn't changed since 1975. I can't wait for that one. And actually a bunch of good games out there, but also some cancellations this week too. We saw West Green and Cal have canceled their games. Baldwin and NA is off.
Yes.
Might have been a couple more. It's going to be tough for these teams to get full seasons in, I think, just because the way the calendar works and it being 2 weeks, it seems like for most of these teams, when they have a positive test, they're losing 2 games. Going to be a weird year. I'm not sure what team success is going to mean, but still good for us. The way we cover football, I want to get out there and see these guys. I want to see these guys that are going to be playing at the next level, that are going to go on to be, hopefully 4 or 5 years from now, I'm talking to some of these guys at the combine in Indianapolis and speculating on their NFL future. And that starts at the high school level for us. And that's what I think really sets the way we cover football apart. And so I'm excited to be a big part of it this year.
Yeah, and one guy I'm curious to get your take on after you see him is wouldn't be surprised. Right now, Pitt only has 1 offer out to a 2022 guy, and I think a lot of that could change depending on what happens this season. But Woodland Hills has a defensive back, Deontay Williams. He got his first offer this week. I believe it was from Toledo. It was Kent or Toledo. But I believe I wouldn't be surprised if he's on Pitt's radar down the line. I think they need to see what he is. But from what I hear, he's a tremendous athlete, and he has 2 years to develop. So see what happens with him. I'm actually scheduled to talk to him this weekend, and so we'll see with that. But prospects come out of the it's all about development on the field, and they're going to have that this year. And we'll see what Pitt's able to continue with their success with WPIAL kids. Next up for them are Derek Davis and Mr. Dinkins from North Allegheny. So we'll see if they're able to land any of those two.
Sounds good. And we'll keep this 3-headed monster of high school, college, and pro football rolling as long as I can physically take it. Anyway, we'll keep going. Well, when it gets to traveling, that might be difficult, but we'll keep things going. Mike, thanks for joining me, and thanks everyone for watching this show and all the rest of the content here at Pittsburgh Sports Live. Don't forget to hit subscribe. If you're not a subscriber, click the bell so you get notifications when we go live with our Friday football show and Mike Asty's Mic Drop, with our Pittsburgh postgame shows, which you and Mike will be doing it Saturday after the Pitt Syracuse game, and then Mike will be joined by Matt Geica on Sunday after Steelers and the Broncos. And then, of course, check all of the coverage for our WPIAL and Pitt coverage at Pittsburgh Sports Now, starting tonight with the Whipple Notebook, and my coverage from Woodland Hills, Penn Hills. And then Saturday, of course, PSN will have everything from Heinz Field, Pitt, and Syracuse, and then move over to Steelers Now on Sunday for Steelers Broncos. That's Pittsburgh Steelers Now, and that's our home for pro football coverage in Pittsburgh. Thanks, as always, for watching. For Mike Vukovcan and everyone at Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now, I'm Alan Saunders. Have a great week. We'll see you next week on the Friday Football Show.